Hello, and welcome to Pragmatic Live, Pragmatic Marketing's webinar and podcast series where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product teams. My name is Rebecca Caligeris. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Sales at Pragmatic Marketing, and more importantly to you, the host for today's event. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. First, a recording of this session and a copy of the slides will be available afterwards. You'll be able to access them by the end of the day at pragmaticmarketing.com/live. Second, questions. We love questions. If you look to the left of your screen, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to enter any and all questions you have for us in that box, and those will go directly to me. And we'll work hard to get through as many of those as we can during this session. Now, many of you are already familiar with Pragmatic Marketing, but for those of you not aware of us until today, welcome to the family. We specialize in training companies and product teams on how to be truly market-driven. We provide techniques for listening to the market and gathering market facts, and then using those facts to shape strategies and drive execution. And we've done this and done it quite successfully for over 20 years. Today's topic is one we hear questions about a lot over those 20 years. How do we create a successful product portfolio from what seems to be a disparate collection of individual products? And helping us address this question are two individuals, Mike Smart and Nils Davis, who have tackled this challenge with a variety of companies of all shapes and sizes. So without further ado, here are Mike and Nils.
Rebecca, thank you very much. My name is Mike Smart. I'm here with Nils Davis. We comprise 2/3 of what is a small consulting practice called Egress Solutions, and we've been at this for a little while, both as consultants, more than a little while. Neil's looking at my gray hair. More than focused on a consulting practice, focused on implementing, one, the pragmatic marketing framework for customers who want to take this to a completely tightened, wound level. But in general, we focused on helping product management, product marketing organizations get better at the discipline and practice of doing product management. I won't want to read the introduction slides to you. Both of us bring several decades of experience. Nils most notably as a product manager for much of that time, working for a company called Accept 360 as the product manager for their product management application software system in that capacity, and many other roles in terms of doing product management. I also come with an extensive background in product management, marketing, and sales, and most notably or most recently, prior to starting Egress Solutions, I was a constructor and consultant with Pragmatic Marketing. Today, we want to talk to you about a topic that, let me get the slide to advance. I want to talk to you about a topic we think is very important, especially for product managers, and it really has to do with portfolio management. Sometimes when you think about this and we talk to our customers and our clients about this, it's one of those that comes with a little bit of academic spin to it, and we'd like to take it out of the abstract, out of the theory, and give you some tools and practice to drive from. And the reason for this is because this is something that product managers oftentimes find to be a frustrating area of how to run a better product team or even how to balance the product set. Many companies acquire additional companies, acquire additional product sets. We believe that this practice, this idea allows you to be better able to and better equipped to carry on a conversation and dialogue with leadership teams, carry on a conversation and dialogue with those that are stakeholders about what an acquisition or what a new innovation activity will actually do to existing products. How do we pair? How do we balance? As Rebecca started at the outset, we want to make this interactive. We like the idea of questions. Some of these concepts on the first pass may come at something a little different. So what we would like to be able to do is obviously at points where something's not straightforward or something you want additional clarification on, we'll do everything we can to clarify those points before we move on. The context for this we think is rich. I'm not going to read the snippets to you, but there's a lot of evidence and a lot of backdrop and a lot of history in our industry in the technology sector, specifically the software sector, that suggests that portfolio management and a simplified approach to portfolio management is needed. There are companies that buy companies and ultimately not succeed in making those acquisitions accretive, the term for making them successful. There are R&D efforts that lead to products that no one buys, or there are R&D efforts that are sometimes done for the sake of doing them and find out that they were not feasible or practical to do. So I want to talk to you and share with you some techniques that we believe are very effective for at least beginning the conversation. For, as product managers, giving us the ability to interact in a dialogue, to sit at the table to talk about the impact of various decisions that are made and how they're going to impact the portfolio of the product. Before we do that, we have a quiz. What we'd like to do is ask you to respond. Has your organization had any of these experiences with your product portfolio? And please select, and we'll love to see your responses as we go forward.
We're seeing the numbers go up and up and up here. So
got a count going here. The ball is rising. The bubble is rising. Excellent.
And it looks like, gentlemen, quite a few people are saying that they wish they could select all.
Yeah. We didn't give that option, yes. Wish we could select more than one. My recommendation is select the one that's most significant, most passionate for you. We know that a lot of these will apply.
Looks like we've stabilized.
We've still got some still going here. I think we're, Rebecca, if I'm looking at it, we're close to our registered or attendee count, are we not?
Yeah.
It's slowing off.
Yeah, we're definitely getting to the popcorn mark.
It's kind of like waiting for popcorn to pop in the microwave, right?
Well, yeah, but you don't wait for the last
You don't wait for the last one, right?
We have 370 responses, about 75%.
There we go. All right, we're there. So let's show the results, everyone, as we get the last couple of kernels to pop here. I'm going to let 1, 2 more, 3. Slowing down here. Sorry if I cut you off. Got to put this up so everybody can see it. So too many products, not enough dollars. That's the primary condition, or at least the most popular condition that people find themselves in. And that's not uncommon.
Right, exactly. And then we also see, obviously, a lot of people mention they want to vote for all of them.
Yes.
And then we also see, of course, that having products that they can't kill is a fundamental problem. Not as many votes on the acquisition side as I would have expected, but obviously it is an issue for a lot of companies.
That's a little surprising that it wouldn't have been higher, but it's a good number. And it's one of those kind of things that when it shows up, it hurts really badly if you haven't planned for it.
That's right, yeah.
And you don't think about it too much until it's sitting right in front of you. So actually, it's a good response. Thank you all for contributing to this effort here. Thank you for your responses and candid answers. I'm going to hand this off to Nils because I said at the beginning we want to take this out of the theoretical and put into practice. And Nils is going to share with us an actual case study or accumulation of activities that we've seen and engaged in, I think that will be insightful for you. Nils?
Great. Thanks, Mike. So this is really a composite example of some clients in the last year. We call it linchpin internet. It's sort of, as I say, a composite. This particular company is having problems selling their products. They're grown via acquisition, which is one of the reasons I was interested to see the responses related to acquisitions. About 19 products over the course of 10 years. They do have de facto solutions to some segments, and for certain types of problems, they are the product that people will buy, or they will look for at first. But even in those segments, they're seeing revenues and in particular profits declining over time. So they brought us in to do some portfolio analysis, identify opportunities to improve, and we started with a basic analysis called the Growth Share Matrix. Can you? Oh, you have to advance for me, Mike. Called the Growth Share Matrix. It's also known as the Boston Consulting Group chart or the BCG chart. And the way this works, you're really looking at here a plot of the products based on relative market share against the biggest competitor and the growth of the respective market. And if these quadrants that these products are showing up in have come to have particular names. The lower left quadrant is often called the cash cow quadrant. And the idea of that is those are products that have dominant market share in a relatively slow-growing market. the revenue and profits from these products are often used to fund other products in the portfolio, such as the stars, which are the ones above that. Those are products that have dominant market share in a fast-growing market, and you can think of them as sort of the near future of the portfolio. Those are the products that really require aggressive investment to maintain the market share that they have there and to continue to grow in terms of revenue.
So we have a relevant question here, and I won't mention a person's name. It says, can you please explain the difference between relative market share and market share?
Right. So relative market share is really just the ratio between your market share, say you have 20% market share in a particular market, and your biggest competitor has 15% market share.
And we got an answer from someone who I will name, who is a friend and colleague, Scott Seelhorst. Thank you for your answer. It is absolutely correct.
Yeah. So that's the relative market share. You basically compare yourself to the biggest competitor in the market. And if you have a bigger market share, you're essentially in the left side of this chart than your biggest competitor. If you have less market share than your biggest competitor, you're on the right side. So the extended future of the portfolio is really lies within that question mark quadrant, the one that in this particular case is empty. These products are typically fighting with a lot of others in a new fast-growing market, and they again require aggressive investment to get market share. So that's really what that question mark, you can think of the question mark as the pipeline. The lower right quadrant, also often called dogs, sometimes loss leaders. Usually the first thing you think about for products in that quadrant is that you're going to divest them because they're low growth markets and you have a low market share. Sometimes they're pure profit if you're not investing anything in them, so you might keep them for that reason. But usually the first thing is to get rid of them. So the growth share matrix, it's really nicely quantitative. The bubbles are really plotted against concrete numbers like we talked about market share. It's really a number that you can figure out or you can get a good approximation of. And the market growth is obviously something again. And if you get really good qualitative visual of where your products are with these quantitative numbers.
So we're getting in a bunch of questions, and I want to field them, and we'll pick the ones that we can. We're going to try and cycle back for all of these. We're getting a lot of questions in, which is a good thing. The first one was, what is the relevant size of circle? What are you trying to say?
In this particular plot, that's revenue.
Okay. That's a good one. Thank you. The next one, no, that's a fair question. It's a good one. Thank you.
Color is not meaningful.
Color is not meaningful except to differentiate those products. Size of circle means revenue.
Yeah.
And then the other one had to do with, and I'm not sure I really understand this one, but I'll ask it as it is written, can the biggest competitor be buy nothing or total sales potential? I'm not sure I fully understand what that means.
Generally speaking, that is not what you would use this for.
Right.
You could, but it might not be that meaningful because this is, I don't think you would generally use that.
Right.
You really would use this against competitors that are other products that are being sold to solve a particular market problem.
The next question on the list is, do you consider dogs and loss leaders the same thing? I would say,
They'll often show up here.
Yes.
So technically they're different, right? A dog is a product that you probably want to divest. A loss leader is a product that you may look like a dog, but you want to keep for some reason. It creates synergies or something.
It may be a great tag-along, and it doesn't make money on its own, but it gives your offering the ability to extend, and it may even help you generate profits or margins in other areas. So for purposes of this chart, we put them in the same bucket, but I think you want to do analysis enough to determine which is which.
I would not take action based solely on this chart. I think the bottom line.
Good advice.
But the other thing about this chart is it's a static picture in time. And so we wanted to look at how these products were performing over time. So we added some annotations on the next slide that compared this year's revenues to last year's. So obviously we're looking for revenue growth year over year. In this case, we see that the cash cow indeed is growing in revenue year over year, but the other products are not. So this is obviously a big red flag. I think there's a couple of things that we've learned from this little analysis. So quickly, we learned a few things from this analysis. First of all, there's a cash cow. So there's a product that is actually, you can be pretty proud of if you're Linchpin. You've got this product that's got dominant market share. It's growing in revenue. You might want to improve its growth, but it's growing in revenue and is profitable. However, a couple of other things. There's no product pipeline. There's nothing in that question mark quadrant that's going to eventually grow into the future of the company. We did learn a little bit about what we need from a new product. It should show up in that upper right quadrant. We sort of understand what its growth, market growth should look like and things like that. And we understand what we need for the existing products, which is to turn around the revenue decline. But the other thing is, we did this as an emergency situation. And probably the biggest takeaway for all of you is don't wait until there's emergency to do this analysis. You want to know that these things are happening before they, you want to know before they happen instead of after they happen, basically. So I think we have another quiz at this point.
We do.
So Mike, can you read that
Sure.
off?
Your organization's experience with portfolio management approaches. And again, pick the one that's most meaningful, relevant, that you actually have taken. We don't only allow you to select one answer. So if you'll take advantage of that. Thank you. We'll wait for your response. And the numbers are rising very quickly. We're getting close to the top. Thank you for responding. We're getting near the top of this. We're going to give it a few more seconds, and then we'll share the results with you. And I think that is about it. So, most of you are not using any, at least this tool. We'll find out later if you're using any tools at all. And some of you are familiar with this tool, but you don't use it. And the smallest percentage, obviously, it looks like about 13%. The count on this is about 50 of you out of 390 or some such number are using something like this or this variation of it.
Sort of actively doing portfolio management.
And that's great. If you are putting this capability or something like this into the conversation to start putting your products in quadrants to determine what are they, healthy or not, and then defining how you make a decision based on it, that is best practice. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And in reality, in some companies, that's as far as you need to go, is to start the conversation and to engage in the dialogue, that you understand where these products sit, and that means that you're obviously going to guide action going forward.
There's a reason this visualization has survived for 30 years or 50 years, however long it's been. It's very powerful as a conversation starter at minimum. So, great. Now, I did want to point out that linchpin is not an outlier. This example that I use, most companies have product portfolios that have too many products in them. I mentioned that linchpin had 19 products that they'd acquired. Most of them were not even big enough to really show on that chart. You know, they were probably kind of a waste of time and money for the company. They're also not an outlier in the fact that they don't have enough products in the pipeline. In fact, they don't have any, but most companies do not have a good pipeline for the future. And the reason this is important is, as the chart shows, generally speaking, product companies expect to make about half their revenue from products that were introduced in the last 2 to 3 years. But most product companies are not investing in those products today. So where are they going to be in 2 to 3 years? Their new product pipeline is not very full. They may just be about to crash and burn in that case. Now, you can't see this from the growth share matrix, but most companies also don't balance their product portfolio very well across risk and value. This also goes to this point of the high value, high risk innovations that should be in the pipeline. The portfolios often don't align with the organization's strategy, assuming the organization has created a strategy. If not, that's a different problem. And generally, they're not delivering the value that they could or should. So, sort of, that's the story of linchpin and the conclusions that we can draw. And I think we saw from the survey we did, the quiz we did at the beginning, you know, a lot of people are also suffering from these same kinds of problems.
Right. Now I want to pick up some questions. We've got a lot that have come in since we allowed some people to address questions. I got one here that I'm going to it's a long question, so I'm going to attempt to summarize it. A person specifically asking about the fact that executives in a company are not taking the time to use strategy or product strategy to investigate feasible, practical decisions. Thoughts on how to influence them. We're actually going to take you through some of that, but the crux of this, the core of this starts with product managers needing and having to have really good market-driven information, and that's where the conversation has to start from. And so I will say this to you, it may sound oversimplified, but if you have really good data, really good market-driven data, you can engage in a conversation that is irrefutable. They may not like the data you're giving them, they may not like the response, they may not like the message that the data is saying, but they cannot basically refute or dispute the fact that it's data. And that's where this conversation starts. And these tools we're showing you have an assumption that you are starting with data.
Right.
Because if you're not starting with data, these tools are useless. They just basically turn an opinion into something that has construct around it. You wanted to say something else?
I think the BCG chart or the growth share matrix is awesome for this because it is very concrete data. It's also very MBA-ish. If anybody who's got an MBA has seen this chart, or generally speaking, and so I think it appeals to executives, particularly the ones who have MBAs.
They will have seen this in their course of life.
And you certainly can use it as the basis for a conversation, right. even if nobody says, oh, go do a BCG chart. You can do it yourself because you have the data, and you can then share that and say, I want to have a conversation about this.
The other question says, how do you figure out the market penetration of your biggest competitor? Fair question. In some industry sectors, it can be fairly straightforward. And I'll give you the easy one, the throwaway one. If you're dealing with companies that are competing in a public space, that's really easy to get your arms around. You can do an aggregation exercise to basically look at the number of bids that go on and add up that value and go forward. If you're not dealing in that space, and I move quickly away from it because that is the easy one, the throwaway one, then you're left with what I call imputing the size because you can't necessarily know exactly the data. And it's going to take some data extraction and some data investigation that's triangulated. You're going to have to go to multiple sources. So if it's a public company, you can figure out some aspects of this. You're going to need to impute this. Go to the third-party research realms. They're specific to your space or general that will help define some of these things. And it's a situation where you don't need precision and you don't need absolute accuracy. All we want to know is, are they 2 times our size or the same size? Are they 10 times our size or half our size? Exactly. And if you're within, my view, if you're within 25 to 30% accuracy in imputing that, you're good enough to make strategic decisions.
You're certainly good enough to start that conversation
that
we talked about. And once you have that conversation and the executive says, oh, there's a problem here, go get more data, then you can go talk to analysts or whatever. So you don't even necessarily need to talk to analysts to get to create that initial chart. If you have access to them, that's great because they will have that. A lot of times they will have that information for you.
The last question I'm going to take before we move on, and again, promises to get to as many of these as we can. This is, does anything change in the analysis, going back to the BCG chart, anything change in the analysis if you're in a market with slow growth, so the top 2 quadrants don't come into play? Interesting question.
Well, it's all about relative growth. Because basically you plot your products on the matrix, and you then decide how fast, where you want the maximum growth of the maximum of the market growth axis to be. You can decide that all your products are cash cows because they're on the lower level. You can say that some of your products are cash cows, some that are growing slightly in markets that are growing slightly faster are stars. So there is some qualitative assessment going on there. That is definitely true. And it also actually has to do with the other quadrant as well.
Someone had their hand raised. I'd ask you, if you raise your hand, please submit your question in text because we can't open up the mic to let anybody speak at this point in time.
Any other questions we should cover now?
Let's see where we are here. I'm just mindful of the fact I don't want to have people run over. If the chart extends to negative growth rate, no, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Can we put to this market internal start, can we put to this market internal startup products where you only start customer discovery and business model can pivot? I'm not sure I understand that question. I'll try an interpretation of it. It sounds like, can you use this for a brand new product is what I'm hearing.
And can you use it for a lean startup?
Yes.
I think is also sort of related. It's probably not the first thing that I would use for that because it does depend on market share. On the other hand, if you're looking at a fast-growing market and it does make a certain amount of sense, even if you don't have revenue, to assess where you are with respect to other players in that market.
I would add to that just a twist on it, a rotation on it. If you are starting a new product in an area that already has existing products, you absolutely can use this. It's going to help you define what your minimum viable product is to begin with.
Right, and you're starting from essentially your product will show up on the very far right of the.
It's going to be a question mark at best, right? Yeah. And then you know what it's going to take to make it a star or how to avoid it becoming a loss leader or something else.
And at that point, it also gives you other information. In fact, you might want to even plot the competitors on the chart to sort of see where the gaps are.
The last question I'm going to take before we move on, and again, promises to get to as many as we can, is what if the chart extends into negative growth rates? Would a strong relative market share product with a negative growth rate still be a cash cow? The short answer is yes.
Yeah,
because it's for producing profit margin for you, and your market may be going, the overall market, I have a client who serves in an industry, shall remain nameless, done a lot of work with them, who the overall market share growth rate is negative, and they have products that are extremely profitable. And they're milking this thing, so to speak, not to take the cow metaphor too far, all the way down, and they should. And so some cases, that can be the best situation to plan because your relative investment is now capped by the strength of the market. You don't overbuild.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on. For those people who may not be attracted to the BCG for any number of reasons, if you are an alumni of Pragmatic Marketing, or if you've listened to any of the marketing material that Pragmatic Marketing puts out and some of their best practice, this solution growth matrix comes from the Pragmatic Marketing Foundation course, and no, this is not a plug to take the course. However,
you should.
But yeah, absolutely. But I find in my years of experience with Pragmatic Marketing, this tool to be highly effective at doing a number of things. One, it again starts the conversation about where we want to put our products. The difference here between the growth matrix, the BCG growth matrix, and this one is the contention or the belief is, and I think it's an accurate one, is that you can run a business successfully in a lot of different quadrants, and the question becomes in the balance of investments. So everybody in the sector who lives in the world of technology wants to live in the upper right region of this quadrant. We want to provide capabilities that are high value and impact to customer and have a really good investment curve that translates to raising the barriers to entry. However, there's nothing wrong with running a business and having a product sit in what they refer to as the no-brainer quadrant, which is the lower right quadrant, where our investment is minimal, as low as we can get it, and the value to customer is large. In fact, I would contend, just from my B-school mentality, this is the best place to be. It means that I invested less than my competitors, and I'm getting better margin and better success rate than they are with less investment. This is a great business to be in. You can also run successfully your portfolio by running with utility products. These are products that have moderate impact to customer, but matching low investment. The only thing that changes is how you invest, what specifically you invest in, where you invest. The thing we want to watch is basically over-investing in things that don't have a discerned, decisive value to customers. These things are equivalent in the BCG matrix as question marks. However, again, Nils pointed this out, this is not a static thing, so it's a moving target. We may start out with a product in the Y quadrant, and we can do things to move it into strategic. We may start out with something in the no-brainer quadrant, and we can do things to move it up. You can also start out with something in a strategic vision area, and over time it can be drifting up or down. So the point of all this is we want to test this as we look at this whole point of this, to test it for what we call the RWW analysis. Is it real? Is the product problem we're trying to solve urgent, pervasive, and a willingness to pay to solve it? Can we win with it? And this is really less about can we build it, it's more about can we go to market with it, and can we actually do the things on the post-build side to make it successful? Does it fit within our strategy? Do we know how to sell it? Is it to a decision set maker or buyer set that we're comfortable, our sales are comfortable executing with and selling to? Can we market and message that buyer in a way that we have credibility for? And then the last one is the real question of all of it, is it worth it? Can we somehow, at least at the planning stage, envision a way that we would make profit at it? Not that we have precise numbers, but we know that within the history of our own organization, our own product set, that we know how to win and make these things pay for us.
And is it a better use of our time than something else? I think that's
excellent point. No, that's an excellent point.
We actually have quite a few questions on that one about defining impact and how you would do that and what you're exactly
Okay, let me
there.
back up and then let's see what we've got here. Do you want to help us out with those questions because we're way behind on the text here? Where do you see those?
Yeah, the 2 or 3 around the how do you determine impact to customer?
So the impact to customer, this is fun. It's value to customer. And it's a context around what does this capability do to solve a problem that our customer live with. And I don't need to give a specific example, but we could find a lot of them.
Well, I would say that, not to be a shill for pragmatic marketing again, but those activities in the upper left part of the framework are about figuring this out, right?
Yes, that's true.
Finding the market problem, validating that people are willing to pay for it, making sure we can access those people, through sales and so forth. All of that stuff helps us assess the impact to customers. So it is a human brain-driven activity to figure out the impact.
And it is also something that does not happen inside your cubicle or inside your office. It happens actually out with customers. And so if you don't go out to the marketplace and have a real live conversation with somebody using your product and ask them the hard 7, 10 questions, then what you're dealing with is thinking about it, opinions, and when you get to the meeting where the market-driven data is necessary, you're going to fail or it's going to not be as compelling. Yeah. So that's what impact means. It's translating what our product does on behalf of our customers, not what our product has in terms of how many features it has, how many cool gadgets are in it, how fast the WSDLs connect to the system of record. None of those things are meaningful. It is really, does this help somebody do their job better?
So you can have hypotheses about it, but you
need to validate. Absolutely, yes. Rebecca, you had some other questions in this area?
No, they were all right around there. I just do want to add that one of our instructors, John Milburn, was logged in as well, and he wanted to make sure that we also mentioned that impact is relative impact compared to the alternative when you're mapping it out.
Absolutely, and since we're giving kudos, John is one of the authors of one of these concepts. Thank you, John, for that input. We're going to move to the next one. The point of this is really to look for high value, high impact. What does that mean? I'll offer this by example. I had a client a few years ago, and we sat in the product planning stage of this, and they had a certain amount of money to basically spend on product investment, and they had 15 to 20 products in the portfolio, and the decision around the table among product managers was to equally spend the budget approximately on all the products available. And when I offered to them, that was likened to going to Las Vegas or wherever your favorite casino is, and looking at the roulette wheel and dividing up how much money you want to spend and dropping $5 of chips on all numbers. And that may be a conservative way to avoid losing all of your money at once, maybe. It's certainly not a winning strategy. So the point of this is we want to maximize the return on a few products. Reality, let's get real. Most of the products in our portfolio are going to be average. Many of them below average will have a few stars. The ones that are question marks are going to be the ones that we want to look for impact on. The ones that we decide are cash cows, we want to continue to provide. And so the mechanism if we do this on a consistent, routine basis, we will have a way of maintaining a competitive position. We will absolutely outstrip our competitors in terms of our ability to bet better than they do and win. And ultimately, we're going to be able to have the conversation about what projects are helping drive what strategy. And if I had to summarize any of this, that's the most powerful one, which gives us a conversation to have at the business table with the leadership of the company about why this project ties off to this strategy. We're going to move along. Nils, you want to pick this one up?
Okay, so I think the question you're probably all thinking, and I know a lot of you are not yet doing portfolio management, you're thinking, well, when do I start? And I would say you should start right now. If you have a couple of products in production, you actually should be doing it already. But even if you only have one product, eventually that product will become your old product and you'll need to have new products in your pipeline. And so that's a point where you need to be, even be doing portfolio management even if you only have one product. Now, I do have a quiz here. I'd like to ask you how many products you guys are managing. And this is really, it's either can be you or your group, depends on the context you want to put in. Is it one or is it a few? Is it many?
So we get numbers in, they're coming up.
We'll wait for a few minutes to get the answers here. But you know, I really honestly feel that starting immediately is a good practice. Obviously, the more products you have in your portfolio, the more important it is, and the more important it is to get started immediately.
We are approaching the top, slowing down here.
Okay.
Give it a few more seconds.
Great.
I know.
I keep thinking of the music.
Your final Jeopardy answer is...
Any questions we should handle while
I'm looking at those right now. So we'll put up the results. Let's put up the results and then we'll talk the questions. I think we are there. So here we are.
Okay. So the
You
majority
guys are handling a lot of products.
Yeah, the majority of you are in the 4 to 10 product range, and a lot of you are more than 10 products. So hopefully you can start today after this call on your BCG chart for your products.
So a number of questions here I want to pick up on. I'm just going to scroll back quickly and make sure I don't miss any. There are a lot, so I'm trying to just get through these. And Rebecca, if you see a cluster of group, you can certainly offer them up on our behalf.
She's putting them in there.
I flagged some if we have some time for later, but I didn't have any further they need clarity on a point questions that came up.
Okay, very good.
So we can maybe just move on then.
Let's move on. So quickly.
Okay, so when do you start? You start immediately. Almost all of you are in the situation where you have multiple products, and so it's time to get started. You're really going to be focusing on some big key questions. Your goals as an organization, how you're going to invest your development capacity, and in order to do this, you really have to be tracking and making decisions based on a really large number of variables, including a lot that we've already talked about: risk, value, cost. There's time to market, revenue and profitability, your ability to take something to market, your capabilities, all the things that you analyze really as part of the capabilities for products. And the way that you do portfolio management, or a way to think about it, is really as 2 steps. There's the first step is analyzing where you are. And that's what we did with the growth share chart for the linchpin example, and it's what I'm recommending you guys start with right away. Where are you right now? And you can learn some things off that chart. Am I on track? Am I off track? And so on. There's some other tools and charts that we'll talk about in a moment. We'll sort of go through a little toolkit on these things. And then the second part is really planning. Taking this information you have, taking other inputs you have, figuring out what you're going to do, how you're going to invest, what your product pipeline is going to look like, what you need to kill and what you need to feed. So the toolkit that we're going to talk about, we actually talked about several of these things already. The growth share chart was in the linchpin example. The Pragmatic Marketing Solution Matrix was in Mike's description of the overall view of portfolio management. Mike's going to talk about the GE Mackenzie chart, which is essentially an evolution in some sense of the growth share chart. It's a little bit more
eye chart, depending
a little bit more generalized. It also is a little bit of an eye chart, but he'll explain it. I'm going to talk a little bit about bubble charts in general. All of these charts we've talked about so far are really types of bubble charts. And then some things around how the value of product management type visualizations.
Project management. Yes.
Sorry, project management. Yeah. There are no product management visualizations.
So I want to talk about this GE Mackenzie multi-factor portfolio matrix. Very long.
A mouthful.
That's a mouthful. It's a $25 slide title. And why, for me, and I talk about it, and people who've worked with me in this, notice I always include it in a packet when somebody asks about product planning. It is because it is a good visual representation that embodies both the qualitative and quantitative size of this exercise. And similar to the BCG chart, it requires, I was going to say forces, but that's true. It forces you to put your lovely darlings in sometimes quadrants that may not be the most attractive thing for you. And the reason why I like the balance of qualitative and quantitative is sometimes we use strictly opinion and judgment to make an assessment of our products. And this mechanism forces you to include hard data. So let's talk about some of the things that we're talking about here. So as I get this up here, here we go. If you look at the vertical axis, the market attractiveness, this incorporates things that relate to the objective parts of the market, market share, the general growth of the market. If we are involved in a market that has an upswing to it or an uptick to it, it requires you then to go through and assess the overall market, addressable market, and understand how that sits relative to your particular share of it. It also then forces you to look at the growth rate, the market share growth rate, and any historical things that are relative to your product performance, like historical margins. You got to look at competitive intensity here. In other words, it's not just about you, it's about where do you sit relative to your competitors. And when we look at these things, it forces us to say, in terms of looking at our product, are we high, medium, or low? If it's high growth share, high uptick for the entire market, yet our competitors kind of take it to us, even if it's high growth for the market as a whole, you can't put yourself in the upper quadrant. On the horizontal axis, I should say, it talks about business strength. So the kind of things that we look at there, again, market share, product quality. How many iterations does it take for us to get this thing right? Because that affects the buy-sell cycle. It affects our relative competitiveness, the reputation of our brand. And we can test these things, and we know our brand strength, and we certainly will know our quality. In relation to that, price. Are we a competitive pricer based on discounting, or do we value price? And it'll tell us whether or not we have business strength, inherent business strength within this area to say that we belong in a high quadrant or a weak quadrant. And then it forces us to put these various things along this spectrum. And so the idea is if we are in a high growth market with high share and we have strong business strength, we can definitely put our product in this upper left-hand region, and it's called protect the position. That also means we don't overbuild, we don't overinvest, we continue to stay the course that we're on and moderate it based on what changes we see, versus being in the high growth potential, a high market attractiveness area, we're a weak player, then we want to build selectively. And this is where market data and market facts come in critically to this. Meaning, we want to figure out the gaps where we can add things to the product that differentiate us, not add things to the product that keep us right up there, just a step behind our competitors. So we want to use this in a smart and intelligent way to basically build out the roadmap that allows us to create an opening so we can move from this quadrant to this one. And go to the extreme, if we're down in this area, whereas the BCG matrix have us say lost leader or dog, which again on analysis we want to do different things with, this one forces us to kind of do that. If it's absolutely a slow growing or non-growing market and we have no business playing there because of our own competitive weaknesses and our own limitations, then we're looking at a way to divest. If we're looking at things that may have potential, in other words, well, we're not so bad relative to our competitors in terms of the marketplace and we can play in this space, then can we look for a way to harvest this? The conversation came up earlier about what to do using the BCG Matrix in a downswinging market. And if we are a weak player and we have existing customers, we want to provide a mechanism for those customers to stay with us as long as they possibly can. They're generating cash flow for us. Some of these other quadrants will tell us that we build, I like the term build opportunistically. So if I'm sitting right here in the middle, And usually the first time you go through this, guess what? Most of our products sit right in the middle. We want to basically look for ways to manage earnings and build selectively. We want to build for the things that are there. I call it opportunistic investing or opportunistic development. If I get 7 customers or 50 customers relative to my market space and my customer base to basically go along with what we're building, knowing that there's a high probability they're going to buy the solution or buy the extension, then I'll build it. But I probably won't bet on the come. I probably won't overextend and overinvest in this area. So that's really the benefit of this particular chart over the BCG chart. It gives you 9 boxes as opposed to 4 boxes.
And each box actually has some sort of instruction.
And this does come with instructions, and I didn't invent this. Bright minds at General Electric and Mackenzie put this together, highly used. And again, for the purposes of conversations with your MBA leadership in your company, this is something they will either have seen, be very familiar with, or comfortable with in terms of understanding what you're trying to tell them, what you're trying to communicate when it comes to explaining what it is. They will get this.
That's right. And
real quick, someone did ask if there was special meaning to the colors of the boxes.
No, I just had to have a way to kind of put them there. I'm sure if you went back and looked at the original, not for me, they're not. It's just a way of differentiating with the colors so that you move them from one to the other. There may have historically been some color charting. I don't know.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
I've seen it both ways.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions on the?
Yeah, thank you.
No, not on that area.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's move to the next one. Nils?
I want to talk just generally about bubble charts in general. The growth share matrix, as I mentioned, the value matrix, the GE McKinsey chart, they're all types of bubble charts. The strength of bubble charts is that you can look at a lot of dimensions on them at once. At least 4 between the location, the bubble size, and the bubble color, often a 5th if you do things with the shapes or things like that. And I mentioned that in the planning process for portfolios, you have a lot of variables. You have more variables than you can show on a chart, but the bubble chart is the way to get the most possible variables onto a chart at once. So that's just generally the use of it. Here's another example. I like to make my bubble chart so the upper right quadrant is the no-brainer quadrant. In this case, product 3 is relatively low risk. It's high value. It's relatively low cost if we think of the size as cost. Whereas product 4, high risk, low value, even though it's low cost, we probably don't want to do it. And then, as is typical with bubble charts that compare risk to value, a lot of our products are on the upper left diagonal, which means that, generally speaking, value and risk are related, right? A more valuable thing is going to be more risky to do. This is just one example of a lot of different types of bubble charts you can create that will help you get insights into what's going on with your portfolio or what's happening with your plan. And then finally, I want to talk about the project management visualizations. These are things like Gantt charts. Roadmaps really fit into this as well. The goal of these charts is really to show you a time dimension to your data. They're particularly useful for resource usage and allocation, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, and revenue over time. Those are the 2 things that are most interesting from the portfolio management standpoint. And the other thing is, as we're starting to look at these project management visualizations, we're starting to cross into the management of the portfolio, not just the analysis of the portfolio. So when we get into the planning, what are really the goals of the planning? Well, it's to figure out how to invest to achieve the future that we want. How to build the product pipeline, how to take into account all the criteria that we have, such as diversification and risk, and you can see the list here. How to figure out what we should be investing in, what we should be divesting in, what we should be aggressively investing in, doubling down on. So those are the goals of the portfolio planning, and basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be laying out your ideas for what your product portfolio will look like over time, and then using some of those analytical tools we just talked about to assess how well you're doing with that plan, right? How well that plan meets the objectives, how well it meets the strategy, how well it meets your capacity, and so on. And so it's very important to recognize that portfolio planning is a time-based problem. So next slide.
Before we go there, there's a couple of questions I saw picked up.
Okay.
Someone was asking the question about how do I introduce the concept of killing products? And it's not easy, first of all. I'm going to admit to you, it's not easy. Secondly, if you have market data and it is not an emotional decision, it needs to be a financial decision. And I won't oversimplify it, but at the point at where my expense projections exceed my revenue projections, it's time to cut it loose.
Right.
And that
should be the obvious one.
That's
right?
the obvious one. And there are places where it's not so obvious, and then I say you step down the investment, which is realistically more likely to be the case. So we're not going to shut it off. So you walk into the COO or the CEO of the company or the VP and say, we're going to shut off the funding for product X because you know what, we saw a seminar and those guys were experts and they said do it. I guarantee you might be doing a career-limiting move. So what you need to do is apply a lot of data, financial data, market data, operational data. What's the support effort here? Sales projection data, and then raise the discussion that says over the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, we're going to step down the investment in one or more areas. And you just say step it down. And you can always say, and let's see what happens. And when you step it down, 5%, 10%, whatever you believe is realistic, and nothing happens, now you have the data going for you. You know, we stepped down the investment. We took off 2 engineers in terms of doing bug fixing, and those customers still pay the recurring revenue stream, and we had 100% re-sign up, and nothing has changed.
Yeah.
That now becomes the new level set for running the product. Yeah. And next year, if you step it down again and nothing happens, then you've got a good trajectory going on. At any point in time, the safety net is, and guys, if things start to get hairy, we can always turn it back up. But to keep it at the level where it is where the problem starts. So regardless of the evidence and the data telling us otherwise, we tend to continue the burn rate until we realize that we've overspent for it. Right?
And I think there's a lot of aspects to this. First of all, in this webinar, we aren't really going to get into the process of killing products, which is a whole multiple webinar series in itself, because there's a lot of different best practices around doing that. I think the more challenging thing is it's when you've got underperforming problems or underperforming products, you go through the process that Mike mentioned, no question about it. The bigger challenge is I've got some products that are promising, but I also have some other products that are more promising. And how do I convince the organization to kill the less promising but still obviously good products? If you think back to, Steve Jobs had a great quote. He said, "I'm more proud of the products that I didn't build than the ones I did build," because he had to say no to them, and that was hard. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunately one of these things that as product managers we have to do hard things, and that's one of them. And so the more, as Mike says, the more data you have, because obviously you don't want to remove a product that's creating revenue and not replace it with a product that's creating more revenue, right? So that's what you're really trying to work on here. You're trying to say, here's a product that's not creating much revenue, it's not creating much profit. I want to kill it so that I can take the resources I'm spending on that and put it into something else that's going to create more revenue and more profit.
I'm reminded of a saying a friend of mine from Central America is, you have to kill your dogs on time.
Yeah.
Relevant here.
It's a famous phrase, kill your babies, right? And it's not just what to do, but when you're doing it, right? There's a really strong time component in portfolio management. Obviously, you can't do everything right now that you want to do. If you overcommit, you're certain to fail, right? Portfolio management has a big impact. You don't want that impact to be you hitting the ground at a high velocity. And so overcommitting will get you there. Personally, I'd rather be undercommitted and less efficient than overcommitted and dead on the ground, right? I think that's really important.
Managing expectations.
But on the other hand, you think about it ties right into the conversation we were just having. You need to grow your new products to offset the decline of the old products. And that may be the old products that are dogs that you need to divest, or it may be the cash cows that in 2 years will be dogs and you need to have something to replace them with, right?
Interesting feed on a question we got about how to do this and not drop consumers or drop customers, which is part of it. Mm-hmm. If your customers see the pipeline and you start to develop a reputation for having a pipeline of new, interesting, exciting products, and I hate to use the Apple example, but that's a valid one.
Right.
None of us are basically concerned about them obsoleting or downsizing or killing an old product because you know they're going to come up with something that's going to be better.
That's right.
And that's the reputation they've earned over 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting in your space you have the opportunity to do the same. Get under-committing and over-delivering to a pipeline scenario is how you get out of the fear of saying, but if I cut this loose, then what are we going to replace it with? The answer is our pipeline is going to deliver for us.
Right, exactly. That's the goal. The pipeline is there to take over for the things that you kill because the things you kill are not as good for you as the things that
and they're not as good for your customer or your marketplace either.
Exactly. So,
let's move on.
Okay.
So this other area that interestingly enough showed up, we had a case study built around acquisitions with the amalgamation linchpin case study, and we did a survey that only affects 5% of the people roughly on the webinar. But this is one, at least in the space that we seem to operate of late. A lot of companies doing strategics, a lot of companies doing smash up and roll ups. This is the one that seems to pounce on product management like a 700-pound gorilla. And it may not be the frequency, but it's the impact when it happens. If you're not doing this method, if you're not doing something like this, when an acquisition happens, it seems to me that product management gets left flat. We are the ones that are being asked to make this work, figure out the strategy in retrospective after the deal is closed and put these two things together and make them better. And so while we may not be invited into those conversations pre-deal, we may not have earned the quote-unquote rights to sit at the big boys tables and have those conversations. I know it's probably a little cynical, but I'm sorry. But I would say that it's incumbent upon us to entertain the idea to ask the what-if questions. What if the gap that we just realized in our product were solved via an acquisition, that we didn't get the go-ahead to make it, we were asked to go buy it. It's part of our build by partner methodology. What if that happens? And then suddenly the dynamic changes. Well, the dynamic changes because unlike something we build, it comes ready-made. And 90% probability it's not going to be designed in the same architecture of our existing portfolio, which may have some opportunities associated with it, but it also represents some challenges. So we offer this to say that playing this game, and I call it scenario games, and I think it's a fun Friday afternoon conversation because when I was a product manager and I ran product teams, this is what we used to do on Friday afternoons. And then when I ran a team, I did this to keep people from booking out early. So at 3 o'clock when the traffic started to get really bad, I'd say, let's get together and have a conversation and play what if. And the what if was, what if we bought company X? What if we bought a product that met our gaps? And the conversation was participating with everybody allowed us to do that. So I want to move on because we're almost out of time here. I don't want to hold anybody past the hour. I've been reminded. The other piece of this that starts to fall into play is then how do you do this with the idea of innovation in mind? So while acquisitions are an important aspect of this, ultimately we're trying to do this in a way that shows us we can innovate and build things. It's extremely important. And we say that most of the time what happens in this situation, and I throw up a stage gate overview just to kind of show how you can use something as structured as stage gate, maybe even as old school as stage gate to do this, is to entertain the innovation capability early in the process so that when we are here, we're basically looking at preliminary investigation and avoid the use of financial metrics. Do not apply and do not get forced to apply the classic ROI, NPV kind of analysis on any project at this idea day because you can't meet the gate. You can't raise the bar high enough. You don't have enough.
Typically because the risk is too high.
Exactly, and there are too many
uncertainties. Which is a multiplier.
Yeah.
You just don't know. Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you work in an organization like some of I know you do, where the cost element is going to predominate, then I say allow the conversation to resonate around what I call level of effort. So if that's the case, then most of us have the skills, or at least can get the skills around to say, how much effort is going to be involved? Well, in order to prove the point, the preliminary investigation, I need 2 engineers and an architect for 6 weeks. Well, we can easily cost that. And so what we're asking the organization to do is bet $20,000 on an investigation, or bet $50,000 on an investigation if you have really expensive architects. And we use this as a way of going through everything until we get to this stage, our fail-kill stage. By the way, objective here is if I start with 10 investigations, I want to probably kill 8. If I start with 100, I'm going to kill 80. It's not to take our favorite baby through. It's to basically take a large mass of these and knock off the ones that are not good enough. Nils made an excellent point, the quote from Steve Jobs, and the other capability in talking about building the pipeline. That's how we get to a pipeline status. We're doing this all the time, and we're killing more. We ourselves are killing more than we're taking through the process. And if we use some kind of qualitative metrics in the early stages, some kind of scoring mechanism, and we start to have success with it, our credibility will rise. And so the iterative aspect of this is we want to do this quickly. It's not months of investigation. It really should be something you measure in weeks, and it's going on all the time. And most importantly, we're going to learn how to pivot. And so we start out in one place, understand initially that may be a great idea. We're probably, high probability, we're going to end up someplace we didn't know we were going to start out at.
Right, exactly.
Let's keep going here. We got a summary slide.
So,
and then
summarizing what we've talked about really at this point, this is a high-impact activity, and it's partly to avoid that high impact of you to the ground at a high speed. It really consists of 2 primary activities: analysis of your portfolio and then planning of your portfolio. It has to be reality-based. We've talked about all the data. You really need to manage uncertainty. That's what reality-based means, right? You can't just make wild-ass guesses. You've got to make some guesses that you can back up with some data. How do you do that? You reduce uncertainty using things like the upper left activities on the Pragmatic Marketing Framework, finding a market problem, understanding the market, understanding competitors, validation. You manage other uncertainties and risks via stages, as Mike just talked about. You need to always know what you don't know and what you need to get more certainty on. It's really just, you need to say, what do I not know here? And figure out a way to learn that. It's a balancing act of all these different pieces of information and data: risk and reward, strategy alignment, capacity. You have to face the fact that you're going to have to start killing things. Having too many products in your product portfolio is just as bad as not having enough, maybe worse, and you need to start now.
So we know this is a lot to bite off in an hour. And it happens to be, as you can tell from our conversation and the animation we have here, you're not seeing our arms wave. It's something we feel passionate about because we've lived it, and we know what the worst case scenario looks like, and we understand what good looks like. So we offer our help. We provide a range of product management and product marketing consulting services that go from actually doing things that help people get their hands around the tools and capabilities to do this, to actually providing mentoring and advisory support in this area. And we've been doing it for quite a while. We've been at this for a while. We've serviced a large range of customers, both in North America and in Europe, and we're here to help. And so you can reach out to us. We have a blog that we run, Product Management 2.0. 2 of us and several others contribute to it. Our website, if you want to get there and see what we do and how we do it, and reach out to us via email, as you see right there. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rebecca to see if we have time to field any questions that we may have neglected. Rebecca, it's all yours.
And we're happy to hang out.
If you're happy to hang out, this is what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to skip ahead to the end slides. There's a tab for Mike and Nils on the bottom left that says questions. Go through it and let's start picking some of those that we can, for anyone who still has time and doesn't have to run off to a meeting.
We have time to try and address any questions if people are willing to wait around and see. So let's go.
All right, but first I just want to mention that this is our final webinar of the year. We're not doing one next year or next month rather, because of the shortened holiday month. But we will be back strong in 2015 with our Box of the Month initiative, where we will highlight a different topic from the framework each month and provide extra information, insights, and implementation guidance in that area. And the Box of the Month also drives our webinar topic, so you can kind of get a sneak peek of what we'll be talking about next year. And then just like I know Mike and Nils are happy for you to reach out, we are also happy for you guys to reach out to us, either at the company level or me personally. And then I do want to call out that just today we opened our 15th annual Product Management and Marketing Survey, and for those of you who are familiar with it, it really does serve as a benchmark for kind of the state of the industry and everything from salaries to what the product management and product marketing roles are evolving into. So I highly encourage everybody to take 5-10 minutes to complete the survey at pragmaticmarketing.com/take-survey. All right, so we have a bunch of good questions, so we can continue to go through those, and if people have follow-up ones or new ones, I would encourage them to continue to go through. I've highlighted a few. I don't know if you guys have a preference of where you want to start, or you just want me to pick one.
Go ahead and pick.
All right. Can you share examples of qualitative scoring mechanisms to use in the preliminary investigative stage?
I don't want to sound like a commercial for the framework or for pragmatic marketing, but one of the things that I would say we want to do, and this is sort of it's an axiom out of that training, which is to find market problems that are urgent, pervasive, and there's a willingness to pay to solve. Now that sounds maybe overly straightforward, but it is just that straightforward. In the preliminary engagement phase of investigation, we are looking for and we can start this a number of different ways. We can start with a product concept or idea that we believe we've seen enough evidence to find that this is worth an investigation. And that product idea may come from internally, it may come from a customer set, it may come from just a specific gap analysis, and I've seen it come from all. Well, immediately our investigation should be about finding out whether or not this is a real problem among our target customers or our potential customers. And then from there, what we want to do is continue that iterative validation from concept of problem, urgency, do they live with it and there's no way to solve it, or is it a latent sort of thing that it's a frustration? So we want to make that determination. Yeah. Is this an annoyance, or is this a real legitimate problem that's stopping the business, our customer's business, from going forward or making our customer's business inefficient?
You're always going to start with some kind of a hypothesis, and it may be qualitative or quantitative. Even in the early stage, it can be quantitative.
Right.
But your hypothesis is, we hypothesize that enough people have this problem that we think we've detected in the signal, and now we're going to go test to see whether they really do.
And the deep dive on that is understanding the problem. Many times what we do, and I'm guilty of this myself, is we want to run off and build something really quickly.
Right.
And so spending more time in the investigation to say we really understand the problem and its nuance, really important.
Yeah. But some of the early investigations may be technical as well, right? So it may be, do I have the capability of building something that solves this problem that I have detected? So it doesn't have to be a qualitative outcome. It just has to be something that's low cost and time bound, in order to reduce risk. Because that's what you're really after. You're not after, per se, qualitative assessments. You're after reducing the risk
lowering
of whether you should go ahead with a bigger investment. And that's what that is about.
Next question, Rebecca.
Sure. What would you recommend for companies going through acquisitions where they have to combine or get together multiple portfolios?
Depends on whether that's pre-deal closure or post-deal closure. I have recommendations for both. If your company has announced, and many times this is done, that we are acquisitive, meaning our strategy going forward is going to include the acquisitions of assets, full products, or even companies. And if you're in product management, that should be a signal to you that there's a change. If it's just being done as of right now, that's a change in maybe the history where we have relied on our own internal capability, our own distinctive competence to build. We're starting to spread that around and look for other ways to gain the growth and the market relevance that we want. That means that your job is changing. Bottom line, you're not going to do exactly the same things. In fact, it means that there's more emphasis on strategic than it is on tactical. So I would say if that has been an announcement made inside your organization, then you want to acquaint yourself with some tools and techniques for doing several things. One is the example that we've laid out today to start elevating the conversation. I call it a what-if conversation about what does it mean if we, instead of building this, we bought it. Because that changes the dialogue and conversation for everybody on the product team, not just product managers. It changes it for QA. It changes it for development, and it certainly changes it for your architects. If you're on the other side of this, and it's already happened, I'd say flak jacket up, put some real good camouflage on. No, get serious. That's a really tough one. I have a client right now that's going through an integration activity, and it's hard. It's difficult. And I will say in their defense, they planned for this. They knew what was coming. It wasn't a surprise to anyone in the role of product. However, it's detailed and important. The most important thing, go back to the tools we talked about today. We have a roadmap. We know that roadmap is going to change. We have a strategy set. We need to look at the new assets we've acquired against the old assets, and without emotion, objectively put them in the right quadrant. Our babies should not show up and automatically be better looking than the acquired babies.
Right.
And so our darlings may not be as good as some of the others. The role of product management in that context is to, as best as possible and as quickly as possible, get the integration plan represented as part of the roadmap.
Right.
That means, as we talked about before, you may have to cut off some things that you anticipated building for your stack, for your approach to the product. And the investment may need to shift to the acquired product. In the customer example I gave you, this company went off and acquired a new technology. And there's been a really interesting discussion about taking down the investment in the old technology to feed the new one. And we're trying to get the emotion out of it. But it's not easy. But market data rules the day. We helped them actually go out and do a view of the market and an actual customer and potential validation through some market discovery activities, and came back with very strong data about what should be the priority. And that's where this conversation starts to gain traction and get lift. Any other questions?
We have several questions around sort of how to balance investment of resources, right? Whether it's between cash cow, balance new investment against cash cows when you have limited resources was one way it was put. Let's see, there's another version. How does one focus R&D time when it's sustainment versus new development of cash cows? So how to strike that balance?
So there's several different ways of thinking about this. The most obvious, almost correct way to do investment is to invest in products based on their revenue or their run rate, so proportional to the run rate. One of the things we're talking about in portfolio management is that while it makes a certain amount of sense, it's not probably your best use of resources. You want to figure out how to invest less in things like cash cows and use some of that reduced investment in the cash cows to focus on the things that are in your pipeline. And there's several ways to do that. One of them is to simply just do that and just allocate more to things that are in the pipeline relative to their revenue. Often things in the pipeline don't have any revenue at all. So allocating direct relative to the revenue is challenging. Another way to do it is actually to divide your capacity into buckets and just have a bucket that's focused on R&D, not on specific products. Essentially a bucket that's focused on developing this technology that will go into products in 2 to 3 years, and have another bucket that's focused on a little bit nearer term stuff, and a bucket that's focused on maintenance. You size those buckets appropriately, and there's different approaches there. And then you just maintain those buckets. That's obviously a collaboration between the engineering organization and the business organizations and product management to figure out how to do that allocation, but that does actually work very well. Another way to do it is, as Mike mentioned, is to really just use this level of effort approach on the more risky and far longer term visions. It's sort of related to the bucket thing. But those are some ways to do it. So basically, overinvest in high growth markets, underinvest in relative to revenues in your cash cows is one of the fundamental steps.
And recognize that depending upon the size of your company, this can go from being relatively straightforward to do to nearly impossible to do. And we recognize the fact that depending on the structure, culture, and nature of your company, the advice that we're giving here may require some extra hand-holding.
That's right, yeah. And so this is actually, in some cases, a great use of a strategy consultant to come in and twist the arms of the executives to make them make the right decision.
Well, and to be more politically correct than arm twisting, it's really showing the executive team the impact of not reaching this kind of transparency. Because on one level, and I've worked with companies where engineering will resist the idea of putting people, plan or otherwise, in allocated fixed budgets,
Right.
because it removes some things that they've built or their practice around, which has to do with managing expectations
Right.
and covering contingencies.
Yeah.
And so that potentially goes away for them. And on the executive front, it suddenly then starts to require a level of discipline, of transparency. That means that sales has to show up and say, if you sell this, yes, it probably will generate $5 million extra in year one, and that means that they know they're going to see an increase in quota performance. And there's all of those kinds of things that go on. But in reality, we're talking about improving the way your organization works, and that's never as easy as it sounds.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm karate with the arm twisting. Mike is Aikido with the leading people into.
Rebecca, any more questions here? We're getting up to after a quarter after the hour.
Yes, I was thinking with quarter out there, I'm going to give you one more question, and then again, I would encourage anyone to reach out to any of you guys or to us directly if their question didn't get answered. And I'm also going to see if I can convince these two gentlemen to do some even little podcasts of maybe some of the follow-up questions. So we'll get through those at some point.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll do that. We're committing that right now.
Excellent. And so, and I have you on tape, just so we're clear. The final question then is, what combination of data should be used to determine whether or not to kill a product? And there's a couple, again, multiple questions around this. Some concern that just looking at margins wouldn't give the full picture because of resource needs, et cetera, et cetera. So.
No, that's absolutely correct. So where I've seen this done and seen it done really well, and that's only about 5 companies since I've been doing this. And I mentioned before, it's a step-down process. So even with the best data, you're not going to walk in and push the lever from on to off. It will not work that way. And you look at several things. We look at revenue, obviously. We look at cost, overall cost, and that gives you margin. In addition to that, we look at the we look at the roadmap. What's in the roadmap? And that's a key indicator of what's being planned. And Nils' point about the pipeline. If everything in the roadmap for this product is maintenance and fix-it stuff, and there's nothing new, I'm going to say that's a flag. Maybe not a red flag, but it's certainly an orange flag. The other thing I'm looking at is support. What do our support mechanisms look like? So if you go to a support desk, you've got 15 people supporting the product, and they're taking 1 call on average a month. There's an example. So I've got 2 buckets that have nothing to do with cost I'm looking at. It's the support bucket in terms of effort and concentration, and it's the development bucket in terms of what's being planned. The third bucket I want to look at is the entire customer base. What are these customers doing with our current product? Again, you got to get out of the building to find this out. If you have a mature customer base, a user group can be a perfect example where to do this. One company I saw did this really well, went to a customer forum. They hosted a customer forum, and they held breakout sessions. And they asked the customers, a lot of customers using this product, what was their vision of the future for this product? And it was stasis. It was leave it alone, keep it where it is. Well, if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, customer input being the last one, about the state of this product, that gives me a lot of evidence to say, again, go back to my idea. I'm going to take support, since we're only getting 1 call a month. I got 10 people supporting this product. I'm taking 2 off the desk right now. I'm going to put them somewhere else. They're not going to lose their jobs. I'm going to put them on another product that's got more issues, more concern. By the way, if you're not pointing this out, your support manager has already done this. He's already figured this out. The same thing with your development manager. If there's nothing going on but break fix, QA fixes, they've already started moving people off. So officially, go on a record, step down to support. If your customers are telling you they want APIs more than they want new capabilities, that's another indication. So I say in combination, these things should lead you to be able to have an adult conversation at the table with anybody about the state of this product. And then lastly, put it on the grid somewhere. Put it on the BCG grid or the Solution Matrix grid. If it shows up like a utility product, you know what, guys, we have X number of customers who are contributing X number of dollars in recurring revenue. You should stop paying commission on this. Save yourself a cost of sales. You shouldn't be paying sales for churning the base over and over again for something that's going to happen by itself. Combination of things like that.
Yeah, and then some specific techniques, as you say. You also often, once you've made the decision, you inform the customer base. You stop selling.
Thank you. You're transparent. You got to signal it many times. Tell them what's going on.
Exactly. And there's some good techniques for doing this. People, people are not shocked anymore when a product that they barely use is end of life, right?
Right.
And there's good techniques for doing that.
Yes. And there's a path forward for them off the product that they choose to.
That's right. Yeah. Usually there's something that's, a market leader in that area that is.
Hopefully it's your product and not your competitor's.
But even so, you might not be making any money here.
Right.
So, and you're not interested in that market, obviously.
Thank you all for your questions. Rebecca, thank you for allowing us to present. We appreciate it. Your gracious hostess or host.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nils. And we look forward to doing this again. Everybody have a great rest of the week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in.